I apologize, I'm doing this from the house today, so not exactly at work. For DOTD users, there's actually a link on the intranet page for LaPave. It's up under where all the site manager stuff's at. For the external users, if you Google LaPave, or if you go through the DOTD Materials Lab website, you'll see a link to LaPave in the menu. And when you click on it, if you're not logged in or if your browser hadn't remembered your ID and password, it will ask you for your ID and password. And that's where you just punch in the DOTD ID and password we issued. And, if it's the first time you log in, you'll get an email verification. It basically just sends a link to your email. Just click the link in the email and you'll be ready to go. Alright, so when you first log into LaPave, one thing to make note of is everyone has a dashboard. And under this dashboard, if you go to the Profile tab, you'll be able to see your user info. This is just a test user I have, but this shows the email address that we have on file, any security status you have, most of this for DOT users, and then the different plants you have access to, what security you have on each plant, as well as any contracts you have access to. If you need access to a plant, you can either email me, or if you go to Active Plants, there's a place here where you can request access to a plant. This has every plant that's listed in Site Manager. When you request access, it'll actually generate an email to anyone set as a plant manager, and the plant manager is able to approve or deny. Similar for contracts. Contract authorities handled through our Site Manager application. So for right now, if you need access to a contract, you can search for the contract ID. Why is my filter not working? I'm spinning. But basically, when you select a contract, let's try this again. When you select a contract, it'll pull up the details about the contract, and when you hit this request option, it'll actually generate an email to me, and I'm able to verify plant access, or the plant user actually needs the contract, and once I verify it, you'll get an email notification stating that the contract has now been approved. You can see also in my list here, it'll show any contracts I have pending status or approved status, anything like that. So basically, any of your plant and contract functions are handled under the dashboard. Other tabs to make note of at the top, there's a tutorial tab. This has a link to where we're posting the videos. Right now this session is being recorded, so after I get back to the office, I'll get it posted on the YouTube channel, and it'll be linked through here. We're also building user manuals. Right now we only have one for the asphalt modules. We will get one posted for concrete, but all the user manuals and everything, videos will be located under the tutorial. We also have a help request option. This is accessible pretty much any page. You'll see it up at the top. This is basically a help ticket. instead of having to email me directly, you can just hit the help request, punch in your issue. We have a few lists of preset issues. Fill out the description, submit it, and this generates a help ticket that comes to me and my group. And once the help ticket's completed, you'll get an email notification of the completion. Another thing to note on the dashboard is any of your requests, mix designs, approvals. We kind of have a little message queue here. You can see it also has a help desk tab. So any type of correspondence is generally tracked in the message queue in addition to generating email notifications. What's that? I guess that wasn't for me. All right. So moving into concrete. Notice that the menu system has multiple layers, and as I click the top layer, the next layer changes in the menu system. So in the concrete side, the material selection is, I don't think we set this up in the Excel, but material selection is basically all of the materials that you would have readily available at your plant. So this will be your stockpile information, this will be any cements, ashes, any admixes, anything like that that you regularly use at your plant. What this lets you do is filter down, because I know in the Excel version we listed everything. So if I want to add new aggregate, fine aggregate, this basically gives me every possible AML item from Site Manager, and this lets me filter it down to just what's readily available at my plant. When I go to enter the custom identifier, this is what I use at the plant. You want to make it unique though. Don't just call it coarse or fine ag. Don't just call it sand. You know, in this case, I may call it sand from A1 Tangipahoa. If you have specific keys or anything like that that you keep up with your stockpiles at the plant, this would be a good place to put them. Because as this material gets passed through LaPave, everything will show with that custom name in addition to the producer and material code. For aggregates, there's a secondary window, and the secondary window is where I can punch in my stockpile information. Now, one thing to make note of is if I mistype, notice there's an error range here. Anytime you see this, this tells me the value it expects it between, and also it tells me the number of digits it's expecting. So in this case, if I entered a 99.9, it's still going to have it because it's expecting an actual integer value. Alright, once that info is in, you can hit save. If there's any reason you need to update the stockpile information, notice this builds a list. Clicking an item on this list will reopen that window where you can update. If you need to remove an item or messed up on a custom name or something of another item, you can actually remove it using the X here and just simply re-add it. One thing we are looking at is the best way to handle if my stockpile information gets updated, how does that trickle to the active mix designs that are using it. So ultimately you'll be able to manage your stockpile information here and have it automatically pushed to all your mix designs. So once you have your list of materials readily available at the plant, another thing to make note of here is if you have multiple plants, there's a drop down here where you can select between the plants. Each plant will have its own list of materials. We are adding a feature where I know a lot of you use the same materials as all your plants. So we will have a feature here where you can copy from one plant to another. So that is in the works.
Hey Patrick, it's Kevin.
What's up?
Hey, if the main thing is like when you're doing your air or your water reducer, you see how you got the AE90?
Yep.
That's very important because we're not going to know which admixture it is if they don't put that in their description.
Right.
Just letting everybody know.
Right. So if I go to add another additive here, BASF, and let's say we wanted that Delvo here. Everything here is tracked by the producer in the material code. This product name gets passed every now and then. However, usually it's a good idea to go ahead and put it in the custom identifier as well. So if I wanted to call this water reducer, this just makes a quicker and easier identification. And the thing is once you fill out your material selection list, unless you're readily changing materials at the plant, this will pretty much be static. If you swap between multiple sources, go ahead and add all the sources you swap between on your list and just leave them in your list, because when you go to fill out your mix design, you're able to select from those materials that you filter down to in your material selection list.
One other thing I would say, Patrick, is if you're filling out and you got like standard gravel and you got standard gravel from two different spots, that you might want to put like from Franklin or Kentucky or something in the remarks to distinguish the two, because when you go back to the aggregates, it's not going to distinguish if you just have standard gravel unless you actually know the number.
Right. And Kevin's been handling quite a bit of this on the asphalt side, and these are just some of the tips and tricks that we've seen just going through with some users, because we had one that just had 57 coarse, 67 coarse, 57 limestone, and when you go to actually build the mix design, it's which source was that, which one of these, and some people aren't as keen on recognizing the APS number. And just to save real estate on some of the screens, instead of punching out this entire producer and this entire material code, we end up referencing things just by the producer number, the material number, and then your custom name. So that's why it's kind of important to have a unique custom name, because it will be used as an identifier in other places. All right, so moving over into the Mix Design Manager. Again, at the top, I can select between all the plants I have access to. Another thing to make note of, up above the menu, there's actually a little panel here where it'll show your active mix design. When we move into production, that shows the active contract and active lot, things like that, at the top. So if I wanted to add a new mix design, again, custom name, this is how I identify my mix designs. If you have a coding sequence that you use at your plant, this is the place to put that in that custom name. Select your specification. Looks like the page is a little laggy this morning. This will show what items I'm set for. If this plant apparently doesn't do roadway, so they just have flowable fill and structural. And all of these filters, so if I swap to flowable fill, notice I only get my flowable fill items. If I have pavement, it'll only show pavement items. So one thing we've tried to do is take that massive AML list and site manager list and cull it down as I select my various items. So if I select 2006 spec, I'm going to get, so they had pavement in 2006, but I'm going to get just the items for 2006. If I do 2016, I'll get just the items for 2016. So hopefully this will help with some of the confusion we had with the Excel sheet, because I think it just had them both blended together. Now notice when I save that, it automatically throws me into this mix design. So up at the top it shows me the plan I'm in, the mix design I'm in, as well as it added a new third menu. And this third menu, you can see the options here, the header tab. The header tab, it'll show me the header info. If I need to update it for any reason, I can. Now one thing to make note of is all of these edit options are available until the mix design is submitted for approval. Once it's submitted for approval, we lock the mix design down so there's no changing it after the submittal. Now we will add a copy feature the way we did in Asphalt, so if there's any reason you need to make updates, create an alternate from a similar mix design, things like that, you can copy. The remarks option is global to the mix design. So if I put a remarks in on the header, notice it adds the user ID, the name of this user's test user, and a timestamp along with the remark. If I click between tabs, this remark follows. So the remark is basically global to the mix design. Now these other options we'll come back to once we complete the mix design. So moving to the Cement and Admix tab, I'll just add a few options here. So if we add a Portland cement, notice this only filters the items I had in my material selection. I only had a fly ash, cement, and additives. And it only has the one cement that I had in my material selection list. One thing to make note of in a lot of these windows, you saw it also in the material selection, the numbers out to the side in green are the actual gravities and absorptions from the AML. The other thing we're doing is if there's any particular notes on the AML, such as alkali restrictions or alkali restrictions or bridge restrictions or any other of the notes that are posted on the AML, we're going to pull those in on the material selection page. We're going to pull those into the mix designs, because what we're trying to do is essentially we don't want to govern what you can do, but what we want to do is put as many notifications on to show, hey, there's a conflict, this needs to be looked at. Many of these windows have a calculate option. We tried these initially dynamic like the Excel sheet, and we run into issues with some of these having so many computations on them that it actually bogged down the pop-up. So in most cases you will have a calculate button, so after you make any updates, hitting the calculator will refresh the panel. And as I build this, you see I now have a grid view that shows the items that I've added. And also down below it will start with the spec checks. So if we add the fly ash, refresh here. There we go. Notice there's two options here. One is for cement and admix, the other is for air and water. And notice down below, any items that I have that aren't meeting the spec tolerance will get flagged. Like I said though, does not limit you from submitting it. So if there's a special case where you're exceeding a design limit that the district can approve, I would put a note in the remarks and submit it to the district. In this case, it was maybe just a mistype. So calculate, save. Everything's in. Additives are very similar. If we're adding our errand trainer, this shows the, like this remark comes out of Site Manager. And this shows the manufacturer's recommendation. Here's the recommendation in hundredweight. And here's the recommendation based on the total cementitious I have. So if I tried to add my additives before my submit, these numbers are going to be 0 because the total cementitious will be 0, so it can't compute these.
Patrick,
Yes, ma'am.
fly ash. You allowed to have 50-50 in a binary mix?
I believe the limit's up to 50, although I think it's supposed to be
30 for fly ash and 50.
Yeah, 50 is flag.
Oh, 50.
Oh.
Okay. I may need to go update my flags.
That's why I was asking, because if they're looking only for flags, somebody might miss.
Well, that's why we're in the user testing phase. I don't catch everything, so anything like that that jumps out, pop a help ticket.
Okay. And
So,
I was asking.
That's stuff I need to know. Like I said, I'm not at the office. I don't have the books in front of me right now. But do a help ticket, LaPave other, we'll say, need to double check. All right, that's all it takes. Help ticket's on its way to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. And don't be shy. If it's something that you don't like, let me know. If it's something you think would be a great idea, hey, can you add this to the page?
You probably should have, Patrick, probably should have put silica fume in there too to check and make sure it was right. That's the other one.
I'm pretty sure it's...
It's been changed. It got changed after the original stuff that we first started with. They increased it. I think it started out as 5 and it went to 10.
Okay. As you do test mixes, try a test mix with silica fume, and if it's out, shoot me an email. I'll double check it though when I check the other percentages.
All right.
I know that they varied between 2006 and 2016 specs.
Oh yeah. A lot of this stuff wasn't even in the 2006 spec.
Right. So once I've input my cement and add mix, moving to the aggregate tab, one thing to note here, this does compute the total volume based on the gravities and batch weights I input. So when I move to aggregate, it shows me the remaining volume for a 27 cubic foot mix. So going to add aggregate, you see this filters just to the aggregates I had selected on my material selection page. And when I select one, it automatically pulls in whatever gravity absorption I have. Again, it still shows what's on the AML. If there's, for some reason, you're using different than the AML, I would make a note. This pulls in the gradation that I input on the material selection. I think we're still working on the spec check here. Depending on if you had like a grade A 57, I believe they all have a set gradation that they need to meet individually.
Unless you're doing blended stuff.
Right. Well, we're planning on showing the individual here if you're doing structural. And if you have a type B or type D pavement, then...
Structural also allows for the blended.
Yes, you can substitute it. But if they spec a regular structural, It would be under individual. If it's just a regular 2-part,
Okay.
core's fine.
Okay. I may have to look at how we're going to handle substitutions. I forgot to put in. So let me pull this off. Notice if I mess up, very easily just pop it off, pop it back on. We did add the option where you can input by percent weight or by batch amount. Whichever one you select on the first, it will require all the rest of them to be input the same way. So if I do this as batch amount.
Nice.
Huh.
And then go to add a second one. Notice it's only going to allow me to do batch amount on the second one. So if I do percentage and go to add a second one, notice it's only going to allow me to do percent. So let's put courses and fines in here. See, I had a guy that was working on all this concrete stuff, and I thought he had some of these checks in, but what we'll end up doing is, like in asphalt, if my composite's not 100, or if my volume's off, which in this case it looks like the rounding on the percentage gave me an extra 100th. It also computes the batch amount off the percentage. If I punch in my amounts, this will convert to my percent by volume. Now, one thing to make note of, I talked with a few plant users, excuse me, before they were doing percent by weight, and this percentage is a percent by weight. But they were doing a percent by weight and directly applying that to the percent by volume. This actually does the correction based on the specific gravity. So if you look at the percent by weight and try and compute percent by volume on this, you're probably going to be different from the way you've been doing it, which I don't know was the best way to be doing it. When I talked to Tyson, he'd said, force it to this way. So if all my gravities are really close, it's not going to make that big of a difference. The difference comes in if I had like a lightweight where the gravity is way off, it can actually cause like a 5 to 10% fluctuation in my percent by volume. So that was a few things that we're just trying to get everyone on the same page with. If I am doing a type B or D, there will be an additional row up underneath for retained that shows my percent retained along with the spec for the percent retained on the blended gradation. Down below is where we have the verifications. I believe these are mainly going to be entered during production, but we're going to tie them back to the mix design. Notice it automatically pulls in my percentages. And Carl, we did add where you can input it using retained instead of percent passing.
Okay.
Patrick, does it allow you to adjust your percentages if it's not within?
That's something we need to talk about.
Yeah,
So
that would be on the plant's end, because sometimes they have to adjust them to get it into parameter. We just had that issue.
Right.
That's correct, but look how it's pulling the percentages. So we have to be allowed to, or they have to be, if it's from the plant, to adjust a little bit.
Well, when they adjust percentages, does it require a new sequencing of the mix design, or is it still all considered?
You can no, on the regular stuff it's 5%. You can make a 5% adjustment.
Okay.
In the spec.
Okay. I mean, what we can do is basically this will pull in these by default, but allow you to update them, and then if they're not within 5% of the mix design, we can put a flag out here. Will that work?
Beautiful.
Yes.
Okay. And like I said, the retained option up at the top, we'll actually swap this where you can input by retain. Now, right now I'm in as a plant user, so I only see the QC. If I'm in as a DOT user, I'll see the DOTD QA option. And if I'm set as both a plant user and DOTD, I'll see both buttons here. All right, so moving on to trial batch. Trial batch, again, we have a plant option and there will be a DOTD option over here. If I'm logged in as DOT, I'll swap after I get done with this mix design and show. For a trial batch, you can punch in the date you mixed, slump, air, unit weight, set times, if you need a remark on it. And this creates a grid view for the fresh properties, and it also creates a grid view for my hardened properties down here at the bottom. Now the hardened properties, again, I can input when I tested. I think the calculate just updates the age on that one. And if I had multiple hardened property inputs, I could put in the multiples, and notice it just builds the list here. For whatever reason it gets too big, you can collapse it.
Patrick, is that an average for like 28 days? That's what we entering, an average, correct?
Right. This is set up for just the average inputs. If I need to break it out where you can put in the individuals, let me know. We can do that.
I think average would work fine.
But
Yeah.
from what Luana was showing me, they were just had them submitting the averages for.
What if the district lab is the one doing the trial batches?
So that's what we'll show here. Let me swap over to my profile. So I'm set as an admin. Notice I have a lot more tabs up at the top. So depending on your user level and access will determine what tabs you can see. So if I go to concrete and select this mix design under trial batch, you see now I have both a DOTD and a plant. So if DOTD is doing it, it'll get flagged as DOTD. And if you're both running it, you can have comparative results. Notice I now have a DOT record and a plant record. Now, if I go back to, sorry, let me swap back. So back as a plant user, notice the plant user can view the DOTD stuff. They can't edit it. And it'll be the same for DOTD. DOTD will be able to view the plant stuff, but they can't edit it.
That's good.
Right? So I have a column for DOTD, a column for plant, and notice I can still add my plant properties, but I can't add to the DOT. So that allows for either or if both are inputting, you know, if the DOT wants to spot check a trial batch, something like that, there's an option for it. The last tab here, Mix Design Review, it basically just pulls everything in. We also have a JMF submittal report. We didn't get everything on this. I'm still updating. So there's a few extra pieces I need to add onto this. But what we're trying to do here is build a printable report that looks just like the existing DOTD worksheet or Mix Design submittal. All right, so at the bottom of the Mix Design Review, notice I have the same options that I also had here in the header tab. This can be done either or. The Edit Concrete Plant List. Now I'm logged in as myself, so I see every plant. If I was logged in as a plant user, I'm only going to see the plants I have access to. But I know that concrete shares the same mixozyme among multiple plants. So if I have, let's say this plant also shares the same mixozyme, I can add them to my list. And then this mixozyme will now be available for both plants. Let me see if David actually got it showing in the list. Yes, so you see the alternate mixozyme is listed here. Down below is where I request for district approval. Now we're moving to more of a global mix design process. So instead of submitting a mix design every time for every project, what you end up doing is getting a mix design approved for a set of specifications. So in this case, it's for Class A1 2016 spec. So I'm requesting approval for it. It'll show you what district, basically whatever district the plant resides in is the district that will do the initial approval of the mix design. So 62 groups, going to get a few emails because this actually fires off emails saying, hey, I have a mix design you need to approve. The district will have a link that will actually take them to the mix design review page where they can review everything. They do a district check option where they can either check or deny, put in any remark. And then there's a district approval. Now the check is typically done at the DOTD technician level, and then the approval, we talked yesterday, I think the approval was still going to be, well, it's different between asphalt and concrete, but the final approval of a mix design is still going to be on the lab engineer. So when I hit approve there, notice it now shows approved. It shows who approved it, who checked it, who requested it, the date it was submitted for request, the date it was approved, the date it was checked, and I now have an option to request to add it to contracts. Again, this contract list is only going to filter down to contracts that I have contract authority for. I'm logged in as the admin, so I see everything. If you have a massive amount of contracts, especially DOT users need to add, you can filter them down here. Now this filter will find either the contract number or any part of the description. So notice I just put in test, and I'm getting contracts that have test in the description, contracts that have test in the actual number. So we tried to make a lot of the filters where it's very easy to find things. But once it's assigned to a contract, you will be able to pull it into production. Now production we're still working on. Let me see if we have anything here. We have it hidden for everyone but admins right now. But basically on the production side, you'll be able to add a lot. Yeah, he's got it locked down. Okay. And when I go to add a lot, it's only going to see the plants and mix designs that have been assigned to that particular project. So like I said, at this point, we're basically wanting users to get in, click around, try and add stuff, let me know if stuff's broken, try and break things. Just try it out. We want people to get in, get the feel of it, get used to using it, and go ahead and fill out your material selection of all your items you have at your plant, things like that. DOTD users, if you need to be assigned to a plant, let me know. Basically what I can do is, in here, dashboard. For those of you that are plant managers, you will see a plant management tab, and this allows me to see what all users have access to my plant and what security level they have. We set up this option so that the plants themselves can essentially manage their users. So if I'm a plant manager and I have an employee that just left in a not so peaceful way, I probably want to go in and pull him off where he can no longer access my mix designs and my mix information. So as a plant manager, I can very easily come to this tab and remove that user from all my plants. Also, if I need to add someone to it, as long as they have a DOTD ID, punch in their ID, it'll pull their info in, and I can grant them which access I want to approve. So that pretty much covers the concrete mix design portion. So are there any questions, any concerns?
Very nice.
Looks good.
It does look good.
And I think a lot more of the plant users are going to be more eager to see the production side, especially the ready mix plants, because we're planning on basically all of your production data will be referenced to your mix design, which means you will be able to access it. So all of your ready mix information, your hardened properties will get back to your ready mix plants.
Hey, Patrick, and for production, we're going to put the PSI from the cylinders and the aggregates? Or just...
Right now we're setting it up for cylinders. If you like the aggregate verification stuff will go in. Is there anything else that needs to be listed under the production side other than your fresh properties, your cylinders?
Service resistivity?
Service resistivity is there. We also have an option for flex. I don't know if anyone actually runs flex right anymore.
Not that I know of.
But yeah, those are in. The hold up on that is I got to tie everything to Site Manager, and it'll be a two-way communication. So if I create a sample in Site Manager, it'll get pulled into LaPave. If I create a sample in LaPave, it'll get pulled into Site Manager. If I update one, I have to reflect those updates in the other, and it's just a big pipeline I'm having to set up back and forth to make sure everything syncs properly.
Now, how will the PEs, are they going to do theirs in Site Manager? And it's going to go back to the mix design if they put the mix design in?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the other option is with the Pavia application coming out, a lot of the information that'll be handled by PEs and inspectors is going to be geared through that, and we're building a pipeline that goes from that to Site Manager and LaPave.
So like when we run cylinders and aggregates, we'll just enter them in LaPave now in the future?
Right, and all that information will get pushed to Site Manager.
Okay.
Where does it generate the mix design number?
So on the Mix Design Manager, once the lab engineer has done the final approval on this, it gets assigned a mix ID. And this mix ID, the sequence that we're using, this is the last 5 numbers of the plant, and then this is just a sequential counter. So every time I approve a new mix design, the next one will go to 3, the next one will go to 4. So that happens as soon as you approve the mix design for the specification.
Okay.
And then that same mix ID is going to be used on any project it's submitted to. So instead of having a different mix ID for every project, it'll be one global mix ID, but you'll reference it with the mix ID and the project number.
But if this same mix design is used at another plant for this same company, it's going to have a whole different number.
No.
No?
No.
Yeah.
Because your plant number is going to change.
When you do it in production, because this is shared, so let me go back to the other plant here. See, still has the same number on the shared plant. What we're going to do in production is you'll select the mix design first, and then you'll select I need to figure out which order you want. But basically, when you select the mix design, you'll select which plant it came from as well when you create the lot. Now, do you have multiple plants submitting to the same lot, or is one lot per plant?
One lot plant.
Yeah, if it's just one lot on a project, yeah.
Yeah, but Carl, you don't have in lot whatever, you allowing them to take from 2 plants on the same structure?
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, we had a big bridge job the other day. Yes, they were pouring out of the Ruston plant and the West Monroe plant at the same time. But I want us. Well, no, we had trucks from both plants because we were using the same exact mix design, and they were pouring on both ends, and it didn't make no difference which place the truck came out of.
Were they separate lots for each plant, or were they pouring in the same lot?
No, pouring the same lot because it was a structural lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carl, what if you have a penalty? How do you do that if you're not separating it? So you're going to penalize?
Well, it was two lots. I mean, we would have penalized that whole lot. Would have got penalized.
But you penalize both plants?
Well, it wouldn't have I'm not going to penalize the plant. I'm going to penalize the structure on the job where they poured that deck. We're going to penalize it, and then the penalty. I'm not penalizing the plant anyway. The plant is penalized by the contractor. If they just won't pay them.
Question is, there's no way you isolating either, right?
No.
Okay.
And I think some of that's going to come in the Pavia application. We're actually looking at a way to basically scan and house truck tickets. And one thing as we progress, we'll be able to link mix designs to truck tickets, where you'll be able to pull all the truck tickets that were for a particular lot for a particular mix design. So I think that will resolve itself in the future.
Hey, Patrick, I got a question. When we was doing asphalt, we didn't have the project number on it at first, and then we put it on. Is the project number going to be on the form, like the PDF?
Yeah. If right now in asphalt, if I do it from the mix design, even in asphalt, if I do it from the mix design review, it's not going to show a project because this is submitted for a particular spec. However, we have under the reports tab, you can look at mix designs by project. And if I have an actual project selected, when I click a mix design, it will fill in the project.
Okay, that's what I meant, because on asphalt it fills it in now. It makes it a little easier for the people looking at it.
Yep. Yeah, we're handling concrete the same way.
Okay.
The idea is that instead of having to go through the asphalt and concrete tabs, any project engineer or CNI or anyone like that will have access to the reports tab, and they'll be able to pull everything by project. So instead of looking at the actual details of the mix design, all they're concerned about is that single paper or the single printout. So they'll be able to pull it here for their project, and it'll tag their project at the top.
Back to something you mentioned a minute ago, when you was talking about putting aggregate gradation in on here, that would be just the supplier, wouldn't it? That wouldn't be the district lab,
right?
Because we still had to sample per project, so many of them.
Right.
Okay.
Everything on the material selection page is really for the supplier. However, in asphalt, I know they sample. I don't think they do as frequently as concrete, but notice I'm logged in as an admin. I have a plant column, a DOT column, and an IA column. So if a DOT person needs to input a comparison sample to the stockpile, they can do it here as well.
I was talking about the production when we enter the aggregates, like we put in Site Manager now. In the production part, where we put the aggregates in that we normally put in Site Manager.
Yes, and that's
your project stuff you're talking about, ain't you?
That's what this is, right? Where you're basically doing the blended percentages comparisons.
That would be, yeah, that's on the, but even on the regular gradations, where we just run the gradation on the coarse and the fine, when we
Correct.
have a 2-part mix.
I was asking, are we instead of putting that in Site Manager, are we going to put that in LaPave instead?
Yes, and it'll basically be linked to here, so you can either do it at the mix design level, or you'll be able to do it at the project level, and it'll tie back to the mix design. So
Okay.
if I'm using the same mix design on multiple projects, that may become a thing where instead of having to sample by project, I can just sample by mix design and reduce some of this repeated sampling, because it's all coming from the same plant, right?
Yes, most times, unless you have a job that's using 2 plants,
Right.
They have to.
And that may be something I need to add in here is which plant material.
We would have to amend the sampling manual if we did that, because it goes by project now.
Right. And that's something that the sampling manual is a living document. I mean, we talked about changing stuff yesterday at the lab engineer meeting.
Okay.
Before, we didn't have a way of managing mix designs at a global level, and now that we do have this option, we can actually update some of our sampling procedures to handle things at more of a global level instead of doing repeatedly at the project level. Because there's a lot of stuff that says 1 per project, and I know like geotextile fabric, I could use the same lot of material across 15 projects, and it expects 15 samples. But really, I just need 1. But we have no way to handle it at a global level, so that we get 15 samples and they end up only testing 1 or 2 of them.
So, Patrick, just to clarify, as a supplier, would entering in those gradations replace the paperwork delivered to the job site to the inspector?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
What we'll essentially do is the inspector will have, there's another group working on, it's called Pavia Headlight, and it's basically an iPad field book that the inspectors will have. So we're trying to get it where instead of sending paper back and forth, if we can just get the information from the plant captured in a vehicle such as this, then we can just punch that information straight to the inspector. The one thing is, they're still going to require truck tickets to carry. I think they're looking at alternate ways to handle that with maybe some barcodes or RFID tags. There you go. So we're looking at ways to handle with kind of a digital audit trail instead of the paper trail, because I know papers get lost, papers get smudged, papers get dirty, papers get messed up. It's so much easier to handle this stuff through a digital level, or track it at a digital level.
Okay.
But again, that's, if you have suggestions, if you're like, hey, this would be great if we could punch it in here and have it get to the inspector this way, that's stuff I need to know. Unfortunately, I've only got 2 people in development on this right now, one of them being myself with 50 other things to do. So it's not going to be something that'll be out tomorrow, but, if I get it on the list, we will get to it. And, we're looking at trying to build this for mainstream use to, like I said at the conference, assist both DOTD and plant, and contractor. We're basically wanting to enhance the communication. We're wanting to enhance the transparency on the DOT side. And we're wanting to make a vehicle that, instead of feeling like, hey, we're having to do more work, or hey, we're having to do, this should cut down on a lot of the workload, because a lot of the stuff is handled now at a global level. A lot of it is more quickly accessed. You don't have to filter through 1,000 material codes in Site Manager, things like that. So, any other questions? And as we progress, for those of you that know Marty Farkas, he's been kind of traveling district to district and actually going to a few plants to do training on the asphalt side. And he will be picking up the concrete side and doing similar. So we'll have some hands-on classes at either the plant level or the district level where you actually have someone sitting right next to you walking you through it instead of doing it over the webinar. We'll also hold a few extra webinars. If people have problems, let me know. I'm flexible. Either myself can get out there or one of my trainers can get out there. If there's a tool or a document or anything like that, we're looking for recommendations. I don't shy away from criticism either. If you think it's the biggest piece of crap you ever seen, let me know. I'll try and shine it up.
The biggest thing is going to be, I know up here, is going to be the training of our people at the plant to put the stuff in, and know exactly what they're doing.
Well,
and because another thing we have a lot of up here too is plants who don't have their own technicians or anything anymore, and they hire private labs to do it different. We have 2 or 3 different private labs doing different plants up here.
Those private labs are able to get access to it and be assigned to the plant and handle all the design management as if they work for the plant.
Okay.
What about consultants?
Same way. As long as they have a DOTD ID, they can be assigned to a plant.
Okay.
And we did have, like you said, it's a learning curve for a few people moving from the pen and paper. A lot of people were using the Excel version. I know some people are still submitting stuff pen and paper. So there's a little bit of a learning curve moving to this system. Like I said, we have a long testing phase. So this is the time to get in, just try it out. I don't expect people to start using it tomorrow. I don't expect people to start using it next week. Asphalt took the better part of a year for people to finally go, this is so much easier because I can submit something, email notification. If something happens at one of my plants, I get a notification of what's going on. So there was some hesitation at first, but as we progress, there's a lot of asphalt plants have jumped on, started using it and loving it. So we're wanting to, see sort of a similar push from concrete, hopefully. Kind of hesitant at first, people not wanting to use it because it's a big change, but after they get in, start using it and realize how much more of a simplified process it is, they jump on and start using it. All right. If there's no other questions, I think that'll do it for today.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank y'all. Appreciate the attendance.
All right.